Whenever you're ready, Johnny.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming out here to show your support. We really appreciate it. Okay, I would like to introduce you to our guest. He hails from Decatur, Georgia. He's been in the industry a long time, directing movies, feature films, among other things. And please give a warm welcome to Mr. Stephen Miller.
Santa Claus with a flame.
How are you today, sir?
Good, thank you.
All right, so tell us, would you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. Like you said, I was born in Decatur, Georgia, but I grew up on the East Coast in Florida. I went to a film school called Full Sail in Orlando. They had a 13-month kind of like shoot you out program where you learn the basics of equipment and things like that. So I did that when I was 21. So prior to that, I was sort of just floating around. I did a lot of music videos in the early 2000s, late 90s, and because I graduated high school from 99. So from 99 to like 2001, I was just shooting a lot of music videos for bands like Poison the Well and a lot of hardcore bands and stuff like that. And so then I started traveling with the CKY guys who eventually became Jackass guys. And so I was doing a lot of skateboard stuff for them. And basically that's how I got my start of learning my craft of filming, because I also had to learn how to edit that stuff together, and was doing a lot of deck-to-deck editing while we were on the road, and just really learned, I guess, the old school way of cutting and pasting editing-wise. And so, I was sort of in a world of not understanding what I was doing, just random things with random people and not really having a point. And so I figured I'll go to film school because film school makes directors. And that was probably the dumbest thing I could think of. But anyway, so I went to film school and really quickly learned that they didn't teach me how to be a director. What they were teaching me was how to work with other people in the industry and like learning the equipment, which helping me learn to be an editor. Because I thought at first I wanted to be an editor. That was what I really wanted to do. I love editing, so I started out editing. And while I was in school, I met a few friends, and I happened to write a small screenplay called Automaton Transfusion, which was a short. And my friend Will Clevenger at the time talked me into expanding it into a feature while we were in school. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And expanded it to a feature. And then we were pretty close to graduating. I was getting pretty frustrated with school because I kept hearing teachers in Florida say, don't go out to Los Angeles, that's not where you want to be. You want to stay here and start off small, start off in the new studios, blah, blah, blah. And that was pretty irritating to me, considering I spent a lot of money going to the school. And I thought, well, they should be telling me to shoot for your, go big or go home. They shouldn't be like, here, stay in Florida and figure out what you're going to do. So that really drove me at that point to say, okay, how am I going to make this movie right now? Because I have all of the tools at my fingertips, because the school was an insanely well-equipped school with any kind of gear you can think of. They had it. And you have all the students who are hungry to make movies. And so I gathered about $6,000 together and got a few of my friends together and said, hey, let's go make this movie, Automaton Transfusion. And we were probably a week into making it. And after the first week, I put out a trailer. I cut together a trailer of our first footage, and I put a trailer online. And somehow it went viral. This was 2007. It went viral. With Ain't It Cool News, and a bunch of other people saw it. So when we got a call from New Line Cinema, the 8th day into shooting, we only shot for 9 days. So the 8th day into shooting, we got a call from New Line, and New Line was like, hey, we want to check this movie out whenever you're done. So obviously that was everybody's like, oh my God, New Line Cinema's calling. We have a hit. This is going to be huge. It's going to be great. And so it got everybody pumped up to get us through that 9th day, which was like a 22-hour day or something ridiculous. And finished the edit of the movie. And so I had the movie, I finished school, and I didn't know what to do with it other than New Line Cinema wanted to see the movie. So I was going to make the trek out to LA by myself, and I was going to figure out how to sell this movie. And after making the movie, I only had about $200 left to my name. So I, got out here. I was sleeping in my car for about 6 to 7 months starting. And I was staying at the Y in LA, in West Hollywood, in Santa Monica. wherever I could shower, basically, limited. And while I was doing that, I was going to, well, right before that, I showed it to New Line Cinema. And New Line said, no, thank you. And so now I'm out here with, because the movie wasn't completely done, I had no sound design on it, there was no score, I was just showing them like a rough edit, thinking they'll understand, they'll get it, they're executives, they understand what a rough cut is, this is what the movie could be. They did not get it. They did not like it. They did not want anything to do with it. So my first experience was being pretty hardcore rejected, and now knowing what do I do? I'm out here. It's been 5 months that I'm out here with nothing, and I thought I had it tight enough for them to like. And so I literally scrounged up another like $2,000 or $3,000 for calling friends and family and stuff like that, and found people on Craigslist to sound design the movie and score the film. And then I started making friends with the bouncers and the security guards at Paramount, Sony, Warner Brothers. Whatever bars they were going to, I was going to. And so I was hanging out there and I met a lot of guys, and I convinced these guys to let me on the studio lots. And would say, hey, can you walk me around to the places that would be the best place to put this DVD of the trailer for my movie? And they did, hurry up, drop it off, get out of here. And so I was at the Sony lot, and I was dropping it off to a bunch of people, and Ghost House happened to be somebody I dropped it off at. And I went back and I was sitting down on one of the benches at the lot, and a guy sat next to me and was like, he thought I looked insanely not supposed to be there. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, so what are you trying to do? I was trying to get this trailer for my movie, and I had it on my iPod. He watched it, and it happened to be Sam Raimi who was watching it. And Sam said, this is insane, what is this? And I was like, it's a little movie I made with my friends, and by this time I'm realizing this is Sam Raimi. And then sweating and then stuttering, and then trying to tell him that I don't know what I'm doing here, don't get me arrested, And then Sam said, you got the whole movie? And I said, yeah, I have like 100 DVDs in my trunk of my car. And he was like, well, we only need one, so okay. And so like Sam, the first person to ever watch my movie on the big screen was Sam Raimi, who took me back to the Sony lot. We watched it on the Sony lot with Sam and all of his executives at Ghost House. And Ghost House wasn't buying movies at this time, it was 2008. So they were just trying to start their Ghost House line. And so Sam literally was like, we can't buy it, we're not there yet, our company's not ready to do it yet. But what I can do is I can walk you over to Bob and Harvey Weinstein at Dimension and Miramax, and I can have them watch it. And okay, and at that time, that's exactly what happened. They walked it over there for me, and gave it to Bob and Harvey. Bob and Harvey watched the movie, they loved the movie. And then they tried to figure out what they were going to do with the movie, and just so happened that they wanted to start their own, another separate division of Dimension, which we call Dimension Extreme. So because of my movie, they did Dimension Extreme, and they put Automaton Transfusion out on their Dimension Extreme label. And so because of that, I was able to get out of my car and have a place to live. But that was 2008, and so it was released in 2008. It did a limited theatrical release, and then it did straight to DVD. And then there was a weird thing that happened at that point, which was DVDs went away. Basically, Blockbusters went away, and nobody was really wanting to do, just to buy DVDs or anything like that. So it became imperative that I make theatrical films. And to try to do that it felt like it was easier because now studios were calling me, and I had now signed with an agent at UTA, and I had signed with a manager, and so everything felt like, oh, this is becoming much smoother and easier, and I'm gonna make, Transformers. And that also was not the case, because I learned a really hard lesson. Like, I got attached to a movie at Fox Atomic, I got attached to a movie at Paramount, I got attached to a movie at MGM, and really big movies. And it happened that MGM crashed, they went bankrupt. Fox Atomic crashed, they went bankrupt. And Paramount Vantage, they crashed, they went bankrupt. And so this was like 2010, and like the whole DVD market crashing had a big play in all the studios dropping their smaller indie divisions, basically, that were going to be doing the $6 to $12 million movies. So all of my movies that I had instantly died, and I've been doing a year and a half of development on these movies, and I thought, well, okay, so what do I do now? And quickly learned that I was only as good as my last movie, which was now 2008, so that's 3 years ago, and nobody gave a shit. So it was like, So I quickly realized that that was the case. And any studio that I was trying to get into and get meetings at and do these kind of things, meetings were happening. They've always sort of happened, but I wasn't getting hired. And it was because it was getting very clear as I hadn't done a movie for over $1 million, and the movie that I had done for, you know, what they thought was 30 but was really 10 was good, but it was now 3 years old and nobody cared, and I wasn't that guy that was sort of like the hot young guy coming up anymore. So I had to sort of shift gears and rethink and sort of like go back to my roots. And I found these producers that had been wanting to work with me, but that were making smaller movies, like $50,000, $100,000 movies. And so I jumped on board with those guys, and they had 2 movies that I really loved. One that they let me literally develop from the ground up, which is called Under the Bed. And then another one that was sort of like a departure for me from horror films, is sort of like an action movie. It's called The Aggression Scale. And The Aggression Scale and Under the Bed we both made for $100,000, you know, shot within like 12 days. And made them back to back. And Aggression Scale got done first. And Aggression Scale last year went to South by Southwest. They played really big at South by Southwest. And while I was there, luckily, one of the producers for Silent Night, Richard Saperstein, who did like Seven, Fight Club, he was at Dimension when they bought my first movie. He was like, "What have you been up to?" I was like, "Well, obviously, I'm just trying to make movies, and here I have one that's at South by." So he was like, "Look, I'm doing this movie called Silent Night in Anchor Bay," and so luckily I was able to go make a movie, you know, like a really great budget level, and that's sort of like where I'm at now. It's like I got to go make that last year. I made that in May of last year. The movie hit theaters in November, and then Blu-ray and DVD in December. And then my movie that I made before Silent Night, called Under the Bed, is actually hitting theaters this July. So sort of rolling now. It's been good, and like I'm leaving in July to start my next movie in Louisiana, and that's with Cassian Elway's. Cassian did Lawless last year, and so it's just now it's starting to really start to go back again and start to move again, which is great. But it was a time where it was very stagnant and stale. I felt like I was going to have to move back home at some point, and so but it really wasn't the past 2 years that's just really started snowballing and got my footing again and actually making some movies that I think, like the next movie that I'm going to go make with Cassian will probably be my first big theatrical film that will play wide, and so I'm excited about that one. But yeah, and then I have some family that I live out here now because my wife's family lives out here. We moved out here once we had a kid. This is one of the places that they introduced me to, and I thought this was a cool little spot. And so I was happy to come back and hang out. He asked me to. I guess that's myself. In a long way.
All right, and let's talk about Silent Night, a little bit more about Silent Night. Okay, now for those of you who like to watch older movies and such, Malcolm McDowell, who's the main actor in the movie. Now, this is a guy who got to work with one of the masters of cinema, Stanley Kubrick, in The Clockwork Orange. And would you just tell us what your experience on working with an icon like that?
Malcolm's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to work with a guy like that, I think, at first, because you're not sure what you can talk about, what you can't talk about, and you don't want. I mean, he's older, and so you don't know if you're going to rub him the wrong way or whatever. But Malcolm was really great, and I shared this with you up there. Is that getting Malcolm was sort of really interesting because I was already up in Winnipeg prepping the movie, and I'd been up there for 2 weeks, and we were talking about cast and who we were going to go out to, and I thought I had saw Malcolm in my hotel. And so, I talked to the producers and I said, I think McDowell's in the hotel somewhere, floating around. I said, call whoever you have to call, find out where he's at. I want to meet with Malcolm because I think he'd be great for this movie. And that was the case. And so the agents called Malcolm, and Malcolm was like, who's this dude? And I was like, just have breakfast with me. I'm not asking you to be in this movie. Just have breakfast with me. We can talk about, Clockwork Orange and Stanley Kubrick, and we can talk about Cat People, which is an 80s movie that I really like. And so Malcolm sat down and had breakfast with me, and we ended up hanging out for like 3 hours. And the next thing I know, Malcolm was like, I would definitely do Silent Night, which was a shock because it's such a ridiculous movie. And it was great because I knew, and I think one of the reasons why he did it is what I told him was like, the script is not good. And I was like, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's B-movie bad fun. And I was like, in the dialogue, the only way this is going to work is if it has some flair. and Malcolm, anything Malcolm says is just cool. So it's like, I knew if Malcolm was saying this, they would take it to another level, and it would become a movie that I think people could have a lot of fun watching and not just sort of roll their eyes and, oh my God. And so, because it's Santa Claus with a flamethrower. And so, it's, for that kind of movie, you really needed an actor, and actors, because Jamie King also came on. So it was like you needed, and Donald Logue, and so you needed these guys that really knew how to work in this space, but were elevated beyond this. So the idea for them to come do something like this with me made a lot of sense because they got to have fun and just sort of mess around. We sort of leaned on the humor aspect more of it than the horror aspect, which is, I think, helped. And so, he's just one of those guys that's really great. And we talked about Clockwork. We talked about lots of things. And one of the things I did for Malcolm was probably made sure he was in a good mood. Is I never shot Malcolm past 11 o'clock at night. Even if we were doing night shoots, I made sure we were shooting Malcolm early enough that he could be out by 11 p.m. And so, I just didn't want him to be cranky. So he was really great about, that kind of stuff and getting all bloody and fighting Santa Claus. So it was cool. It was really cool.
Wow, sounds like a really good experience.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you have Malcolm like face to face, and if you see the movie, he has this one line in the movie that he completely ad-libbed. And it's like the final moment in the movie, it's like Malcolm, Santa's got the flamethrower, Malcolm has got a gun, and he says a line like, oh crap, what does he say? He says something like, don't bring a flamethrower to a gunfight. Yeah, it's like, he said that, and I was like, oh yeah, we gotta keep that line. That is awesome. Like, who would say that? Like, who was gonna say that line? Whoever said that, that's awesome. Who said that? Yeah, you're awesome. And so that's one of my favorite lines in the movie. So, but anyway, he's a great guy.
So he just added that.
No, I mean, and I guess I'm that kind of director anyway. Like, I don't like to go by the page. It's not who I'd like the actor to come in and take over that role. And if that means the dialogue changes, the dialogue changes. I'm not a stickler to that because I think that's ridiculous. Like, if they're going to sit there and like read the page, then it's not real to me. And I can see that, I can feel that. So like, if it's going to be real, it has to be really what they're going to say. And Malcolm is one of those guys anyway who's going to do that, whether I say it or not. So I just let him do it. I mean, that's one of the first conversations we had, which was, I sort of come from that Woody Allen's School of Directing, which is I hired you because you're awesome. I didn't hire you to tell you what to do. Like, I'm going to come into the room and tell you, this is how I need you to move and kind of go through that. But I also like to play with the floating camera so that way the actors can give them a space and then they move. And then I have to work around them, which I think, to me, is much more comfortable for the actor. It's a little bit more difficult for a crew to work around, but to be honest, like that's something I enjoy. I'd rather the actors come in, do their thing, and then I can plot out where I'm going to shoot everything after I've seen them sort of do a run through. Yeah, it was a good experience.
Wow. And could you also tell us what your experience was on working with Jamie King?
Yeah, Jamie's great. I mean, she's she's a screen queen, so she's fantastic. She did My Bloody Valentine, and that's the reason that I came to Jamie is because I think she was great in that movie in Sin City. She's really great, and so she's on a TV show and she's on like a little light WB show, and so I was like, this would be fun for you to sort of not be so clean. You can be a little crazy, and she gets to fight Santa at the end. And I thought that was, and in the original script she didn't, and so it was sort of like one of my ways to lure her in, I guess, a little bit, and she'd probably laugh at that, is that, I told her, you will fight Santa at the end and you will win, because originally it was supposed to be Donald Logue who does it, and I think Donald got mad that he did, and so we did eventually rewrite it so that Jamie could come in and be the hero, and I think it makes sense, because obviously it's her character, it's her movie. But she's just one of those actors that is able to come in and we can be joking around and having fun 1 second, and then as soon as I say action, it's crying and tears and just insane like just presence. She just knows what she needs to do when she needs to do it, and I don't have to say a lot, which is great because I don't like to be that guy just like, give me some emotion, give me some cry. I feel so cheesy when I'm sitting there telling actors like cry, like be emotional, like it's just not like my thing. My thing is to go in and be personal with them, and I like to try to find something that relates to them. And then so it's not me telling them how to act, it's me more or less communicating how I feel this present, what it needs, and she comes in and delivers that. So it's just it's a fun experience when you can have an actor like that who you don't need to physically shout out instructions to. It's just, this is how I feel like the scene should go, we talk about it, we get a sort of personal connection to it, and then she does it. So she made it very easy in a movie that we made this movie in 16 days. So you have to be moving rapid pace. So you're like 2-3 takes, keep moving. And she was just really great. And Malcolm was the same way, just really good. Yeah, I mean, we also had people that were brand new. So, I mean, the little girl in the movie had never done a movie before, and it was difficult for her to be in the 1 or 2 take land because she'd never done a movie before, never even sat in front of a camera before. So, you know, it was fun to work with her too because it's always fun to work with kids. I think they're more accepting to what's going on around them, and they take direction really well. So, she's great.
And can you also talk about your newest movie coming out, Under the Bed?
Under the Bed.
Yes.
Under the Bed is like a. I grew up in the '80s. Not really grow up in the '80s. I was like 10, you know, in '89. So, but I guess through the '90s I grew up watching '80s movies. It's sort of my connection, like Evil Dead and The Goonies and E.T. and Poltergeist and those kind of movies. Like movies that were like kids took on adult problems. That was what I really connected to, and I really loved Stand By Me, you know, things like that. That like, anytime you could take kids and put them in adult situations and have them deal with that is something that I connected to, like Gremlins. And so, Under the Bed is that movie for me. It's an homage to Gremlins, an homage to E.T., it's an homage to Poltergeist, and then take that and mix it with Little Monsters, where you have this monster under the bed. So it's basically these two brothers who know that there's this entity under the bed, and they have to team up to fight it because no adults believe them in this typical 80s fashion, where the adults don't believe, they have to do it themselves, and it's sort of like an adventure in that standpoint. So it's like, for 45 minutes, you know, you're really on this adventure with these kids and trying to figure out what's going on, but then I guess I sort of like take it to another level, and I wanted to see how intense I could make a kids movie. If I was going to do, you know, Goosebumps, like how far could I take Goosebumps? And yeah, it's got an R rating, so it went far. So like an hour into it, like, you know, some people will be like, oh my God, killing kids. And so like, so you know, so that's one of those movies that's really sort of like my baby a little bit, because I really, from the beginning, from story to shooting to everything, I was really involved heavily on it because I really wanted it to be engulfed in that 80s cinema. In fact, even the way we shot it, I shot it with the exact same anamorphic lenses that they used on the Goonies and Poltergeist. And so we literally went to Panavision, and I requested what were the exact lenses they used, and they still had them. And so I was able to shoot with those lenses on the camera. And so it's just a real nostalgic kind of movie. The way the movie flows, the way the movie, you know, the kids interact, all of that stuff, it's very nostalgic. And so, yeah, so that movie, and it's actually got Johnny Weston. Johnny Weston is a guy that everybody will know in like 6 months. I mean, he did Chasing Mavericks just this past year with Gerard Butler, but he just got hired to star in the new Michael Bay movie. And so he's going to be the lead in the new Michael Bay movie. That's going to be insane. And so, you know, he's going to be gigantic. And then Gatman Griffin is the younger kid. Gatman was the son of Angelina Jolie in The Changeling. He was Little Green Lantern in the Green Lantern. He was Little Ryan Reynolds in the Green Lantern. But he's just one of those guys. He's also got this gigantic movie coming out in August. So I was lucky enough to work with 2 young actors that I think are going to be really, really great. And the movie rode on these 2, because if they didn't work, the movie didn't work, because nobody believed that they were in this situation, then, you know, it just wasn't going to happen. So we got lucky with them, and the movie's taken a while to come out purely because nobody knows how to market this movie. And it's just such a strange mix of 80s monster movie that it's had a hard time trying to figure out how they're going to market it. So I'm interested to see what people think of it, because it's so ridiculous. Not in a comedy way, but just in a, you think you were in this kind of a movie and then you're completely thrown into another movie. And so I'm excited to see how people really act. And it's doing it July 19th. I think it'll do like a limited release, which means they'll probably do 25 or 30 cities theatrical, which is the same thing Silent Night did. And that usually means it plays here pretty locally everywhere. You know, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Chicago, that kind of stuff, like the major markets it'll play. And then it'll do Blu-ray, DVD, VOD, Redbox July 30th. So, yeah, I mean, that's just sort of it's my slow burn horror movie, I guess. You know, So very different from Silent Night, which is crazy, fun, gory, splatter flick. And then Under the Bed's very different. And if you haven't seen Aggression Scale is also very different in the sense that it's like Home Alone, rated R. And it's like, what would happen if the bad guys came in? Instead of Kevin McAllister like hitting them with pipes, he was like stabbing, he was like taking them out, And so that's again another movie where I take kids and I put them in this ridiculous situation. I was always surprised that nobody made a Home Alone rated R version. Like, why is there not a kid out there taking out the bad guys like legit? And so that's basically what we did. It was a home invasion movie. And I like home invasion movies, but I just think home invasion movies are so played. And so it was like, what can we do on a home invasion movie that hasn't been done? It was like, oh yeah, well, let's just have the kids start destroying these guys. And so that's basically what we did. So it was fun. So I guess that's sort of like my thing. What kind of movies I like is I like movies that deal in those kind of worlds and just trying out different things. So Aggression Scale is sort of action, and then Under the Bed is very slow burn, and Silent Night's very B movie, B slasher. And then the next movie I'm doing in July is very much like a thriller. Sort of like the one-line concept is teens in a limo. Limo goes off the cliff underwater. The whole movie's underwater in the limo trying to get out. And so very like, I guess Buried is a good reference of what kind of movie this feels like. But so I'm just sort of like picking my moments, I guess, of what movies I want to do. Because I'm not just a horror guy. I like horror movies, but I'm much more of like thriller, action, world is where I like to be.
A lot of good stuff right there.
Yeah.
And also, one last question, then I'll turn the questions over to you guys. What advice would you give to like young filmmakers trying to get their foot in the door, their feet wet?
I mean, I think going out and making your own movie is like the most imperative thing, especially now because you have every opportunity. I mean, I live on YouTube, and these guys that are making these short films like that are insane. Like what you can find with these guys that are so good at visual effects and digital stuff, and are like 19 and 20 years old, and like the camera equipment's there. I mean, dude's got what is that? T3i. I mean, I've seen several features made on that thing, and they look amazing. And so the equipment is there. I think making shorts is pointless to me. Like I don't see the point in doing that. I think you can't sell a short. And so for me, I always tell my friends who are in film school or coming out here, or anybody that even contacts me on Facebook or whatever, because I get a lot, is just that you go make a movie. Because there's no way you're going to learn what you need to learn on a short film. And making a feature, you will learn what you did wrong, how you did it wrong, and it's better to make your mistakes on a feature that you funded, that even if nobody sees, it's just better to do that than someone giving you $500,000 or $100,000 and you making mistakes on that when somebody else is dying. So I always recommend people just going out. You have the tools. It's ridiculously cheap to be able to make a movie. I mean, in 2007, I made a movie for at the end of the day, Automaton cost like $9,000. We shot it in 9 days, and we had at one point 500 extras of zombies running through downtown. We shut down downtown Orlando, Florida. So we did all of that with absolutely no money. And it was just simply because we asked. And I think a lot of people don't understand. You can just ask. There are people out there that are willing to help. And that's what we did. We went to the Florida Film Commission. I said, hey man, I need to get 2 blocks. And he was like, okay, you can have 2 blocks. We got down there, 500 people showed up to be zombies. My makeup guys like, what the hell? What are we gonna do? And I was like, I was expecting like 10 people, you know what I mean? Like 500 people responded from flyers and stuff like that. And so and then, I went to talk to the officer, his name Officer Booze, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. And I was like, dude, can I get maybe 1 more street? And he was like, because he's our officer for the day. And then the next thing you know, he shut down like 10 streets. And so we were literally looked like we had this desolate landscape. And so for a movie that was on like $6,000, when I brought it out here, once the score was done, and funny enough, the people that turned down Automaton at New Line Cinema is actually the guy who hired me to make Silent Night. And so he constantly would tell me, I'm sorry we didn't buy that movie, because that movie made Dimension extremely amount of money. So it's just a thing, you know what I mean? You can make the movies look big, you can make them look like they have scale. It's really not difficult to give things a bigger budget. I think you don't have to have the permanent stuff people think you have to have. You can just ask. I don't know, I think my biggest advice is to go make a movie, and I think that you can keep everybody everybody in this room has people you can talk to, I'm sure, that have like a camera, and you don't have to have, you know, the greatest lighting. You can figure out a script that you can shoot for mostly during the day, and you know, the best thing to do is spend all your money on audio. And if you can have a great audio guy getting all your audio, then you will have a movie. Because the worst thing to do is to hand over a copy of a movie that sounds like it's coming off that camera, or it's coming on. It's the 100% guaranteed cheap. People will not. And I think I've learned that from being in the world where my friends are coming in and trying to get their movies sold to studios, and the execs really have such a short attention span that the trailer has to be good, number one, but number two, they will not watch it. The dialogue sounds like, it does not sound like a movie. I don't know how to explain it other than spend your money on audio. Make it sound like a movie. And that becomes in post audio as far as making it score, sound design, whatever it is, whatever money you're spending, put it in post in as far as the audio, because on-screen stuff, you can shoot that and you can get that done. You should be able to do that very cheaply.
All right, so does anyone else have questions that they'd like to ask?
I'd stay motivated.
How do I stay motivated? I guess I just didn't have anything else to do. I really was, the reason I stepped in my car for a year and a half is I refused to get a normal job. Refused. I absolutely told myself if I was going to need a normal job, I would fail. And I wasn't going to let that happen, but that meant I had to sleep in the ditch. I had to get on my car. There's a moment I was going to have to sell my car if the movie didn't sell. And it sold. And so I got lucky, but the really was I was putting myself in a position to succeed, I guess, that I was unable to fail. I couldn't go any lower. You know what I mean? I was out here, had no family, I knew nobody. And so I started to meet people that I was like, hey, can I shower at your place? And they're like, you know, okay, you, whatever, I can shower. But like the motivation was to live, I mean, to survive. And that's the only motivation that I felt like would keep me doing it. Because if I could have called my parents at any time and said, hey, I'm sleeping, I had no idea. Hey, I'm sleeping in my car, can I get help? Yeah, they would help me. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I felt like that didn't do what I needed it to do for myself. And for myself, I felt like if I was going to make it, I had to make it on my own, and I had to figure out how I was going to get there. So the motivation was always to stay at home. And I guess I'm not saying quit your jobs and do whatever, but I mean that you have to find whatever that is, that passion that it keeps you going. I mean that's just what it is, and I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of this stuff out here, especially the people that I've met out here, it's a hobby. Like this is something they're doing in their spare time. This is cool. Like they like movies, they watch them all the time. That's cool. You know what I mean? But it's not. They're not willing to lose everything for that job, for what they want to do. And I guess that's where I got to the point where I was willing to lose everything. I think at some point you have to be at that moment where it's just like I'm willing to take the jump. And for me, it was leaping out to here. I mean, the great thing about you guys is you're already out here and you have all these things at your fingertips to sort of grab a hold to, and like you can, you know, you're not living in your car, you live pretty close, you know, so it's like you can go out there and come back. But I think it's about finding what pushes you to that limit. You know? Yeah.
What do you think about crowdfunding sites like
Kickstarter?
Kickstarter to help you?
I think, you know, good question. Because Kickstarter to me is like I like Kickstarter. I mean, I can't say I hate it. I mean, you get your money to make a movie, right? It's free money. You don't have to pay it back. It's like whatever you make the movie and then you sell it and it's yours. And I guess I sort of did like a Kickstarter when they didn't have it, which was like just like going around the family, like, you know. But there's also like the reverse side of it where I think it's lazy to the point where it's like you're asking all these people to help you and then they're getting certain things, you know. But I don't want to say it's good or bad. It's just one of those things. If it gets you money to make a movie, then do it 100%. But I do think there's ways of doing it yourself. I don't know. It feels like it's just like I don't know what kind of money that is coming in. But it's just not my money that I'm putting on screen. It's like I don't know. There's something about that. That does the thing with my movies. I was going to make it. The money that I got even really wasn't from my friends and family. It was more or less the loans that I took out to make my movie. And so school loans, and so
I can delete it.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But what it was, school loans. You know, like literally, like didn't really finish my last few months of school because I took those loans to make that movie. So I think Kickstarter would be cool. I think it depends on how it's used, I guess.
I guess you didn't really feel too good about, I mean, you didn't like that approach yourself because you wanted to be the person
Yeah, I
actually
felt like I
doing
wouldn't
it.
feel like I owned it.
Yeah.
If I went through Kickstarter, I would feel like I owned the movie. I feel like I owe people my success.
More
or
right,
my,
more.
and then I feel like I'm constantly saying, well, it's because of all these people that paid for my movie. I don't know, there's something weird about that too. So I was really, for me, it was about doing it myself. I don't know, it doesn't have to be anybody else's thing. That was just my thing, was doing it myself. And if I was gonna make it, it was about me saying I did it because I was passionate about this, and I didn't have to take anybody's money. I didn't have to take anybody's house. I didn't have, because there was plenty of times when people were like, well, we can put you up here, yeah, but if you put me up, then I'm living for free on your couch, and I'm just not. So it's like, there was a lot of like, I guess, pride factors, but a lot of like factors, again, it goes back to that first question, which is, if I do that, then I get lazy, and I start thinking, you know, I'm here, I don't have to work as hard because I have a place to stay. So it was, for me, it was like, where can I be that's gonna keep me pushing harder?
Nice.
Hey, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah.
And be so open too about your story.
Sure.
I overcome the obstacles. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
My question is, you know, I know you noticed you talked about ad-libbing in some of your films, you know, and you shoot real quick, you know, 9 days, 16 days. How important is that? I mean, do you support that? I mean, is that something that you find that you just have to go on the wire where you're just like, hey, let's just see if we can improvise this scene? Do you typically like to, you know, do one your way and then have the actor do one their way?
No, you know, like, I really don't have time to do like several ways. So I literally, for the most part, I'm working a lot in pre-production. Like, even if my actors are not there, I'm calling, and we'll talk about a scene on Skype, or we'll talk about a scene on the phone. And so by the time they get to set, there's already that communication. So when we get to set, I'm already saying, remember what we talked about last week? Let's try to go there. Let's find that, because that was the best spot. So they already know where they want to be when they get there, so it's not a surprise. And I try to do as many meetings with my actors as possible, because I mean, it's such a great relationship, number one, because I love people that I think actors are a special breed, and like they're very open, and then they have a lot of experiences going on. But I like to bring, like I said, I like to bring those experiences to set, because if I need you to start crying, or if I need you to get really emotional, I know what buttons to push to do that. And if we've hung out and we become friends, because that's important, like, I'm gonna be experiencing you for 9 days, 16 days, you know, in bigger movies, you're talking there with 160 days. So if you're gonna be there and emotions are flying, or, you know, things get hectic and crazy, you have to know that that person has your back, and that they have to know that I have their back. So that's just an important thing. So by the time you get to set, there's already sort of that camaraderie, and like, okay, you're gonna do this. So when they get there, I'm not yelling, I'm not that kind of director, I'm not like a tyrant guy. Like, I sit back, I hang out, I'm constantly moving. Like, that's one thing that weirds people out, is that I don't have a chair, or I don't take director's chair. Like, I'm moving, I'm standing at the monitor. When it's done, I'm running to you, I'm talking to you, I run back, I'm moving constantly. And I feel like it's sort of like a pace thing. If I'm paced up well, then everybody else's energy stays up. So it's sort of like what I like to do, and that sort of feeds into the acting. So if my energy's up, they're already at like number 10. As soon as we start out the gate, so I don't have to get to 10th take to get them to be like up here. We just start there. And so there's just certain tactics like that I do. Some instances I'll bring in music, and like I'll have speakers set up, and we'll sit there for 2 minutes, sort of like moment of silence type deal before we start going into it, and I'll play a score of what I think this scene is. And sometimes I play the score for them to act to, and then we take it out, and then we do it again. So they already have like a feeling of what the mood's going to be for the movie. And so I learned that, interesting enough, I learned that shooting music videos. I learned that whatever music video I was shooting, if I was shooting a metal video, the intensity was huge all day long. People were like, all day long. But if I was shooting like emotional pop video, like everybody's kind of moving slow, going over here. So I learned that like the music played a factor. Like it was, whatever music was blaring all day long, that's what these people were reacting to. So I took that into filmmaking, and I really use that a lot, to be honest. It's like, I really try to find what captures the mood, especially the first day. And the actors that are coming their first day, I try to make it light and like playing things that they're excited about, and it gets kind of epic, I guess. It's like, you know, so if they're, you know, Sinai, you get a $3 million movie, but, you know, we want this to feel like an $80 million movie. How do you do that? Oh, let me get some Jerry Bruckheimer. You know, it's like something from like The Rock or something. I'm gonna throw it in there so people go like, what is this? You know, it shouldn't be here. But what it is just a mind thing. It's like mindset. Like, how do I get on the same level as you guys? So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Okay, so how do you get to the point when you're actually on the set, like cast? What do you look for, like in the auditions and stuff, that says, oh, I want that person to be in my movie?
I like people that talk to me. To be honest, like I go through casting directors, obviously, like, and then they bring in a lot of the people, and they bring in a lot of big people or whatever, and you see people come through, and I think a lot of the mistakes that the actors that I see come through, they come in, they sit and they leave, and there's never really that interaction. I like interaction. I like when they come and hang out with me. Hey, I really want this. Tell me why you like this script. Like they're not just sitting down. Okay, they start reading. Because I've been in countless sessions where people it's like a cattle call, right? They just come in, they sit, they read their line, and they're out. But I think the ones that I gravitate to are the ones that come in and immediately say what they like about the material first. This is why I like the script. This is why I feel connected to this character. And then that already has my brain thinking, well, great, they've thought about this. They're invested in this. And so by the time they start doing their thing, I'm already sort of like pushed one way, you know what I mean? Because they've sort of like hit a nerve with me, which is like, hey, you enjoyed it, you read it, you know, even if it's just a side, like I connected with that piece of material. And so I like that. I like the interaction, and so it's not just, you know, you're there doing your thing, you got 10 of them that day, okay, you're this director that I'm dealing with on this one. No, it's something that's, even if it's not that special to you, I would try to make it special to you. You know, like, and really let the director in the room know that this is special to you. Because that goes a long way. Because you have to realize they're seeing thousands of people that day, and literally. And so it's important to stand out. And to stand out is by trying to find that emotional connection in the room. And you only have that 5 minutes. So how do you do that in that 5 minutes? And it's always how you lead in. It's like, I'm in, I love this is great, excited, blah, blah, blah. You know, I think it's important. For me. You know, like for me. So I'm assuming that's a lot of people. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
Amazing story. What's one director, actor, producer you would love to work with?
You know, that's a good question. Like, I would love to work with. I would love to work with JJ Abrams. Like JJ is a guy that like I sort of like. And Sam's the same world where Sam came from making Evil Dead to Spider-Man movies. And so both of those guys started out really small with like Freaks and Geeks, and then now they're making Star Trek, right? So it's like, those are the guys that I sort of idolize and look up to, because I don't want to make indie movies. That's not my goal. Is to make movies that are on Blockbuster just sitting there. Like my goal is for you to go see my movie at Cineplex.
Yeah.
And so I've always had that thought process, and that's sort of like, I'm sort of still in my car, in my head. And so when I look at those guys and like what they're doing, like how do I get to that? And those are the guys that I want to work with, for sure.
What do you think of web series as a way to get your foot in the door?
I love web series. I think web series are awesome. Like I think that's better than Kickstarter, because I think that is a Kickstarter. Like if web series to me, like everybody should have a YouTube account that wants to be a filmmaker. Like everybody should have that account that they are trying to get out there. Like I think it's so crucial. If it's not a web account, if it's your own website that is promoting your material, because you can sell your material on your website. I think like people aren't, like I was telling you, people aren't buying physical copies of anything. So it doesn't cost you anything to sell your stuff. I mean, you can open up Amazon account, you can open up iTunes account, you can open up, I mean, even Netflix. Netflix will buy your material. Like, so it's like, you should be out there trying to sell everything digital. Because hard copies of anything just aren't selling. It's just not the way it works. So I think web series are hugely popular, and if you can find something that hits, you got a great thing going on, because people want to spend money to put their ads on your site, or spend money to put their ad on your YouTube, whatever. Several of my friends, that's just their job. That's all they do is manage their web series accounts, because it's a great idea. I love it. In fact, there's been plenty of things that I personally would love to do web series, because I think it's a way to reach out to an audience, connect with the audience, and build your audience. Because like for me, like saying I want to make those bigger movies, well, it would be great if I already had a built-in audience. So by the time I got there, that it was just a no-brainer that the movie was going to do well. And that's what's great about these movies doing limited theatrical. They start that built-in audience, and I've actually thought about doing web series because I think it's just a great way to interact with everybody. It's like, you put it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and like, 'cause I'm a huge social network guy. So I like all that stuff. It's really great. Yeah.
Hey, your ideas are pretty out there, man. I love that. crazy. When you come up with something like that, I mean, I assume you came up with the idea.
Well, like Silent Night was a remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night, which is a 1980s horror film. And the original movie is completely messed up. I mean, it's like messed up. Like my movie's messed up, but my movie's not like mean-spirited. Mine's just like, sort of like fun and like poking at Christmas, whatever. Silent Night, Deadly Night is a mean movie. like it is a mean movie. There's Santa Claus raping mom. It is a mean movie. You know what I mean? So when they came to me with this script, it was a big thing for me because I don't like that stuff. I like the movie. It's the original movie, and I understand where those things are coming from. I don't like that stuff. I'm not a fan of like if you have to close your eyes and like close your ears and like zone out. I don't want to make that movie. So when they came to me, they were like, "What can we do to amp up Santa?" And because the original movie, he's just a dude with an axe. He's a pretty boy actually. He's like, handsome as any of you guys. He's like dude with an axe. He's singing a song. He kills people. It's really weird. And so it was like, what can we do to amp up Santa? And me and the writer really talked about one of the real life things that happened here in California was a Santa Claus with a flamethrower. Was the Santa Claus went to his wife and flamed his wife. And so we were like, that's very interesting. And so the writer came back to me. He's like, this would be a lot of fun if we did this. And I said, yes, it would. And then I came back and said, well, let's put a mask on. And everybody was like, well, why a mask? It's so cliche. And I was like, yes, but this is supposed to be a throwback to 80s slasher films. And all of my favorite 80s slasher horror films, guys with masks. And so that was like the two biggest things, flamethrower and mask for this version, and how we sort of revamped, I guess, the remake. Because I'm not a fan of remake movies in general. I don't like the idea of like just taking a movie and shooting it shot for shot of a movie somebody's already seen from 1983, whatever. Like that's not the goal. Like I think the goal of remaking was like Dawn of the Dead status, which is like Zach took a movie that he liked and made it his very own. And so that's sort of like what Silent Night was, is taking the movie and sort of the death scenes in the movie. Yes, I did come up with because we were like, just it's fun when you're sitting in those meetings and it's a circle of people and they're like, how do we kill somebody? And it's a fun meeting. It sounds morbid, but it's pretty fun. And so the death scenes in the film were all me. But that's more sort of my things. Like I wrote my first movie, but I haven't. All the movies I've done since I haven't written. I've more or less worked with writers because I'm not a great writer. And if you watch my first movie, you know I'm not a great writer. But it's I love working with people that are better than me. So I think it fuels creative juices, and like I'm much more of a set piece. Like come up with an action scene, come up with a death scene, come up with like I want them to be in this space, and I know I want this guy to karate chop that guy, and then this guy next this guy. Now you tell me what they say in that scene to get that accomplished. That's sort of like how I am, because I'm very animated in when I'm talking about that kind of stuff and how I want scenes to play out. And so it's much easier to have a writer there that's just like and then does his thing. So, but yeah.
As a director, I'm sure you grew up knowing what a director does and seeing the movies before you actually directed something.
No.
Well, I'm sure you had a basic idea of what a director does. What is something that like you got on set and it completely was wrong? Like, oh crap, like.
I think, you know what, I guess you're right. Like, I mean, you understand, like, I guess the biggest thing is people think that you can teach directing, which is wrong. Because I think directing's an instinct. And so I think when I got on set, the first thing that I did wrong was mechanics. And thinking, all I did was say action, cut, and like, and sort of walk through the scene that way. And I think that was completely wrong. Like, because it becomes mechanical, and I learned really quickly after the first day of shooting my first movie, I learned how to deal with actors really quickly, because I thought they just act. I just thought they'd act. I didn't really understand that I was supposed to interact and get them into it and go this and do that. So I literally, I think the first shot was just me saying, okay, action, and everybody just stood there. And I'm like, why isn't anybody doing anything? They've read the script. What's going on? They're supposed to be running and jumping, and I quickly realized that's not what happens. And so it was a good learning experience. My first, like I was telling him, the Thomas transfusion I got bought was never supposed to be seen. Like I was shopping it around, hoping it was going to be like a El Mariachi type thing, like where somebody was going to go, oh, we want this, but we want to remake it into something really big. So when someone decided to put my first movie out for everybody to see, I was like, oh man, this is bad news. Like this movie, if you watch the movie, it's like there's like crazy things going on that I would never do now, but actually, I learned quickly. So Yeah, I mean, I guess it helped that I grew up studying cinema just on my own, like watching movies daily, and that was considered studying to me. But yeah, it was a lot of learning. The biggest one was dealing with actors, but the second one was probably dealing with my DP and how he choreographs the scene. Like, at first I was letting my DP do everything, and then I quickly realized that I could tell him what to do. And so it became a much different experience once I learned that, because I think it's important for a director to infuse his ideas with the DP, because if you let your DP do whatever he wants, then I think it's not your movie anymore. And I think they're great attributes. Obviously, the lighting is amazing; like, it's such an important thing. But I'm very involved with the shots and with how they move and how the camera flows, because I think that's important into the film itself. I mean, in Automaton, the first movie, the big thing was handheld, because I wanted the idea to feel like it was the end of the world, and like you would not be in some kind of still space. So it was like everything had to be shaky, everything had to be crazy. And then when I went to make Under the Bed, the idea was we started the movie off very smooth, and then gradually moved the movie into handheld by the end of the film. And all subconscious, like, I think once I started learning that kind of stuff is where I started to really feel like a director, I guess. It's like, oh, I'm understanding why the camera moves, why I'm shaking the camera here, why is the camera moving there, and I think that's important. And I think that's why you make your first movies, you make them, as many as you can, whether it's web series or movies, you make them because you learn, and you learn how to make those mistakes, and you're not making mistakes on movies that people don't see, really, maybe, but, I think it helps.
Does it get stressful while making movies?
Yes, yeah, it's like it's one of those things. It's like, especially when we are on the level where we're making movies, where it's like, last year I made 2 movies for $100,000, Aggression Scale and Under the Bed, before I made this movie, and we made those movies in 12 days. I think Under the Bed was 15 days, and you have like 18 locations, and we also built everything in Under the Bed. Like, I was a huge thing for me was to build the house, the interior of the house, because I wanted rooms to be bigger, by the movie to be smaller. So we had to build a lot of things, and that's extremely stressful on a movie for $100,000, because your builders are stressed, the guys, the set department's stressed because they don't have enough money for a set design, and they don't want it to look like a bare set. So I think stress is just part of it, yeah. But I think it's how you deal with the stress in the moment. I think for me, it's about turning that stress into just fun. I try not to get stressed. If I'm stressed, I usually we'll usually stop, and I'll try to tell a joke. I'm not good at jokes, and so everybody knows that, so it becomes really less stressful when I'm out there embarrassing myself in front of everybody. Yeah, it's definitely stressful, but it's fun at the same time. I think when I get stressed, I always think about the people that aren't doing what I'm doing, and it becomes a lot more fun to me, because I could be working at Subway or something, and like, so, I really focus on that, but I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I do. So I focus on that quite a bit.
To help you out, what do you call a fly with no wings?
A fly with no wings.
A walk.
Okay.
So you can use that on a set.
I should use that.
Oh, yeah.
I see, you should tell that joke for me, because I would tell it and people would just sit there. Even if it's funny, people just, I'm like, dude, I got that from Seinfeld, this is funny. It's funny.
Have you ever had any experiences working with difficult actors on set?
Oh yeah, I think all actors are difficult, in my opinion. I think they're just because they become so engulfed in this role. And so when you go to say, hey, I think maybe we should do this a little bit different way, it becomes, well, why? And then it becomes a conversation. So yes, I mean, it's just part of the job is actors wanting to have their way and do their thing, which is okay. I mean, that's part of what my job is to wrangle them in and make sure that I'm getting my movie. And it's one of those things that they are difficult, and I've dealt with that, but I've never dealt with anybody that has walked off set or like, a diva type situation. Difficult, that's I take that as that's what it is. And so being crazy, maybe a few times, I've had heard threats to walk off. But I'm usually the kind of guy that's very calm enough to talk to them and get them back to where we should be. And it's usually never about me. It's usually like the scene isn't working, or we're shooting this too fast, because that's a big deal. Like trying to do 2 or 3 takes for more experienced actors is not fun for them. And so, you know, it can become very frustrating to have to do, like Silent Night, the entire end of the movie, from the time Santa comes into the police station and there's rain, the sprinklers are off for the last 5-10 minutes of the movie. So from the time Santa comes into the police station to the time Jamie kills Santa, we shot that all in a 6-hour time span. It's like a 10-minute scene with her going through glass, stunts, and axe fights, and like, you know, in 6 hours is like ridiculous. It's not, you should never do that. And so stuntmen are flying through around and they're, you know, getting upset, and so you're obviously gonna have tempers like flaring at that kind of a situation. But I think, you know, it was, the great thing about it was that we had already had a relationship like I talked about, but we could all, I could come to them and be like, you know, let's relax, we're gonna get through this, it's not a big deal. Because, you know, the biggest thing is that you don't want to let them, you don't want them to think you're out of control. Because if they think you're out of control, then all of a sudden it does start to spiral out of control. So I think the key is to keep everything locked down by the throat. Yeah.
How afraid of you are you afraid of stereotyping yourself as like a horror director?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think that's why I chose to do movie like The Aggression Scale, which was like not, it's different than a horror movie. Like it's still interesting enough, got bumped into the horror world of like the critics and were like, oh, it's a great horror movie. I was like, well, it's not a horror movie. But anyway, like so even Under the Bed, like it is more of a drama. Like Stand by Me is, but once I bring the monster in, it's obviously horror. So it's one of the things that I'm like, it's heavy on my brain all the time, is like, how do I branch out? How do I make sure that I'm not making just Silent Nights for the rest of my life? And like, how do I become the guy that, like Sam did from Evil Dead to Army of Darkness, to all of a sudden, you know, I mean, obviously he did movies in between, like Love and Game and The Gift, but then to make Spider-Man, it's like, you know, how does that happen? How do you make that leap like that? And I always look at Sam, because it was 20 years. And Sam was in the business for 20 years before he's made Spider-Man. He was making like Evil Dead in 1980, 79. So it's like 20 years that it took the dude to get to Spider-Man. And so I always kind of take comfort in that a little bit, because it's like, okay, I'm doing okay. I've only been here 5 years, and I made 4 movies, so I feel okay. But it's like, now, like the next movie that I'm making in July is not a horror movie, it's totally thriller in the vein of like Taken type status. So those are the movies I want to make. If you're asking me what movies I want to make, I want to find my Taken, or I want to find like Born Identities type of things. Like, those are the movies that I really want to make, and those are sort of like what I'm searching out for, like movies that I've been attached to, like the one I'm making in July. I've got another one that I'm making in October, and then another one that I'll be making next January. And all that are sort of like bigger, but none are horror movies. Sort of like my thing this year is to not make horror movies. In fact, I was like on the search for a comedy this year. It didn't happen, but then I put that out there to my agents, like, I want to make a comedy at some point, because I think it's important that I sort of branch out and do other things, so that people aren't just like, well, this guy can only live in this world. And I could probably live in that world and make those movies forever, to be honest, because horror is the thing that's never, it's always huge. People always want to go see it, and I would gladly make it if it's really fun. But for me right now, I'm just like, what can I make that's different, because it's important.
So I'm asking some questions, man.
No, it's good.
You know, when you came to California, you had to overcome a lot of adversity, and it was more like it was connections and business sides, more than artistic.
Yeah.
Would you say back then that business is just as important as artistic? And is it still that way today for you? Like, do you still feel like it has to be that kind of balance, or is it one way or the other?
I think it becomes a lot more business than it is artistic. Like, especially right now. Then it was about business as well, like meeting the right people to get me into the right rooms. I don't think that'll ever change. I think as an artist, you have to be willing to take the team, do what they want to do before you get a chance to do what you want to do. I mean, that's just how it works. I mean, I never went into this thinking they're going to go let me make my $30 million action movie I have in my brain that's sitting right here for them to read. I'm not going to let me do that. It's just not what happens. I mean, the people like Neil Blomkamp that can go make District 9, the great thing about, the big thing that people know about Neil is Neil was in the VFX world since he was 15. You know, I mean, he was using the nerd world for 10 years, making the connections before somebody finally let him go do it. In fact, he's been doing shorts like Halo and all this kind of stuff. So like, there's a lot of behind the scenes that people think that like people just jumped up there. It's just not the case ever, really. It's always about making something for them. Or, you know, I don't look at Silent Night as like sort of making one for the man, but it's in that world because it's like I was getting constantly told that from big studios that want to make movies with me that were like, we can't just necessarily go give you $50 million. We need to see something made for over $1 million because at the time I hadn't done it yet. And so when Silent Night was brought to me, it was like a very quick yes because it's a $3 million movie. Of course, like I need to do this movie for my career. It wasn't necessarily about my artistic choice at that point. It was about what's going to elevate me to the next level, to work with actors at the next level. Because that becomes a big deal for a director too, because when you're making these movies, it's all about foreign sales, okay? So when I'm doing the foreign sales, I have to be able to get a certain caliber actor to sell that foreign for that movie to work. And if I can't get that actor, then they'll easily find another director that can call that actor and get that actor. So it becomes very important for me to work with the caliber talent like that, so that way, if I need them for another one, I can call them, or I can call them and say, hey, you know Liv Tyler, can you call Liv for me? Let her, you know what I mean? Because my agents could do that. They could easily make those same phone calls, but it's much more personal if it's coming from someone that's already worked with me. And it becomes, so it's, the business aspect is so heavy that it's like, it's always going to be there. And I'm totally fine with that because it's like I said, like I'm not really wanting to make my passion, like Under the Bed's my passion project, but I'm not really wanting to make my passion projects to be like Sundance and like, you know, I'm gonna struggle to get that movie out there. It's just not really my thing. Like I want to make big, fun movies. And so I'm willing to like sort of take a hit and be like, okay, it's not my greatest artistic check, it's not my best movie ever, but it's definitely a movie that looks bigger. Like Silent Night's the biggest movie ever. Looks the biggest movie, you know, it looks slick, it looks cool, it's like, definitely looks bigger than Aggression Scale or even Under the Bed. Under the Bed looks pretty big, but it doesn't look as big as this. So, yeah, business extension. Yeah.
Okay, so connection is obviously the number one thing in Hollywood to do.
Yeah.
So how would somebody go about wanting you to direct their film? Or the studio send you the script, you read the script, you look it over, I want to do this film, or
Yeah, now it's different too, you know, because now I'm repped at UTA. So UTA is obviously a gigantic agency. So my agent and I have a manager. And so they sort of tag team on getting scripts that get sent to them, and then they're filtered through to me, sort of like by what I tell them, hey, this is what I'm looking at to find right now. So then they'll filter it and they'll send it to me. And then I'll go in and pitch the movie and to the studio, and this is my take on the movie, this is what I want to do, and then it's never just me, you know, I'm like you guys, when you go in for a role, like I'm pitching against like 10 other directors, like Eli, Rob, and you know, like the biggest guys out there, like that's the thing, I know that. And so it's always about having to try it, like what I tell you, like what do you have to do to step up your game to get noticed? I'm thinking the same thing when I go into a room to get a job, like I'm not just telling you that because I like that, I'm telling you that because that's what I do, like on a daily basis, like, and I think it is about connections, it is about that kind of thing, but it's also about understanding that you're going to hear no more times in your life than you will ever hear yes. You know, you will hear yes 1 out of like the hundreds of thousands of times. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard no. I mean, you know, it's insane. I've been up for great, I mean, it was between me and Dude for Last House on the Left, me and Dude for Friday the 13th. It's just like, you know what I mean? Like I've been there to get those bigger movies and I just haven't, and that's part of the game. You just keep going. And so it's definitely about meeting those people though, because what's great about being in those rooms and pitching those movies is not just that I'm trying to get that movie. Now I've met with the producers of that movie. Yeah. And now they know me. And they might like my pitch, but they can't necessarily give me $80 million to make a movie, but they like my pitch. So the next movie I'm making in July is with Cassian Owens. Cassian did Lawless. He did the Boondock Saints back in the day, but Cassian's like a gigantic guy in the buying, selling market who's been doing this since before I was born, probably. And so Cassian, interestingly enough, was the person that sold the foreign rights for my first movie. And so it's one of those things that like I've heard from Cassian in 5 years.
Yeah.
But he comes back to me with a movie that's really big and says, hey, I loved Automaton, we did a great job with that movie, you made me a lot of money. I have this movie,
I want you
Yeah. So it is about, if it takes 5 years to get that person to come back around, it takes 5 years. And to be honest, I'm just now starting to see that sort of work that I put in 5 years ago with all these people that were my managers and agents put me in meetings with, and are now becoming the heads of studios and the heads of these companies that have a lot of this money that's being filtered out to make these movies. So now they're going back to going, well, who do we meet and who do we see and who's doing things, and then that's how it works. It's like, I was telling you, it's like anybody that comes to me and says, my friend, I've had friends come to me, I'm coming out to LA, I've got 6 months and I've got to do it. I'm like, well, you should just not come. Because it's ridiculous. Because like 5 years in LA is 1 year anywhere else, or any other job. It's period. It's all it is to it. Like, if you wanted to be like, you know, a mechanic or whatever, like whatever that is, like you could do it in a year, you could find a job and move up. But if you want to be an actor or a director or a producer, it is going to take you time. And you just have to be in it, and you have to understand you have to be in it for the long haul, because it's not going to be, I mean, there's a few guys like James Wan, overnight, you know, saw him, boom. You know, there's definite possibilities. But I think that's one of those things that you have to keep in the back of your head, and just be firmly realistic with yourself, and the idea that it's going to take you time. And over time, you'll meet people, and those people might not pay off right away. But like I said, like I'm starting to see sort of like the fruits of that planting that I did 5 years ago, where now these guys are coming back going, hey, you know what, we saw Sinai, we loved it. We didn't even know you've been doing it. Where have you been? You know, or we loved Aggression Scale. South by Southwest was a huge deal for me. It got a lot of attention. People were back on that with me saying, oh, well, Stephen can do this. And I was like, well, I tried to tell you that, but nobody cared. You know what I mean? So it really is. It's like making those connections now, and just not being upset if they say, well, I can't use you now. It's like, yeah, okay, I still call those people. Like, email them once a month, every other month, calling, you know, even to the people, just saying, hey guys, this is what I'm doing. Thanks for hanging out with me or whatever. Like, it's just sort of the world, you know. I'm just trying to keep in contact with them.
Working with actors on a daily basis, I know you mentioned with Jamie King, she was able to joke around, and then as soon as you said action, she was, you know, able to cry or do whatever you wanted. What are some other things that you like to see from the actors on set that you've noticed from different actors?
I mean, there's an idea that like actors, like I like the idea that actors are able to allow themselves to have a good time on set, because I think if you're not having fun, there's something lost. Like, what are you doing? Like, I think, you know, and I think as you get bigger, it becomes harder to have fun, because you sort of get stale to like what you're doing, and you get so lost in that character sometimes. I think that you just have to remember that you still should be able to have fun on set and joke around and not take things extremely too seriously, unless it is like you're in that world of like you're about to be in a scene that's intense. I get that, but you know, in other places on set, you should find yourself having fun. I like that. I can't. If there's an actor with me that's constantly like this woman, and I can't talk to him like a normal person, and I have a hard time with that, and I've dealt with that. And it's fine. I mean, I get through it, and they do their thing, and it turns out great. But for me personally, if to like call it back and say, hey, I want you to do the next thing with me, is like, I want to be able to like hang out and go afterwards, and we have a drink, and you know, or on set, like, you know, he can come up to me and tell me whatever he wants. It's not just like, Steven's the director, you should say what you want, that kind of thing. So it's just sort of, I guess I'm just a very personal person. That's the same thing with people coming in to read. Like, I'm just very personal. I like interacting with people. I like interacting with my actors. I like that process, and I guess it comes from how I got here. That I feel like nothing is too ridiculous. Like, there's nothing that bad, you know. Like on set, we're all getting paid to do something that we shouldn't get paid to do, you know. Like, so it's a very common feeling for me, and so I always try to relay that to them. It's like, hey, you know, making a lot of money to be here. It's like not really that big of a deal if Joe Schmo over there bumped you. You know what I mean? So I try to like, that's sort of thing I try to do. Yes?
What would you say is the best part about being a director?
I think the best part about it is watching people watch my movie. Everything else is cool, like shooting the movie's fun, all that kind of stuff, but I think the payoff is to be in a theater with an audience and have them react, because that's how I started. Was my dad was a huge movie buff, and he showed me The Exorcist when I was like 10. And you know, honestly, I don't remember watching The Exorcist. I remember watching my dad's reactions to The Exorcist and thinking, oh, My dad, the biggest, toughest dude I know, and his wife beater, watching The Exorcist, and now he's got a cover up to his face, and he's like over here. And like, I remember thinking, that is what I want. Like that, those kind of reactions, those kind of emotions, those kind of like reactions is what I want to do. So that's the biggest payoff for me, is when I get to sit in the audience. And when Silent Night came out, I traveled around the country to different theaters, watching, just sitting and watching. No, obviously nobody knew because I'm not that arrogant or like egotistical. Hey, I'm here. But I would sit there just to watch and hang out with people and see, because it also helps me know what I need to do better the next time. Like, oh, that didn't work, or that didn't play the way I thought it would. Okay, then I got to retool or rethink about how to shoot that again. So, sitting with an audience is definitely like my favorite part about being a director. It's seeing them react in a certain way, especially when they react the way you want them to. That's the best feeling ever. It's like when they're screaming or when they're laughing. And even sometimes when they're laughing when they should be screaming is even better, because you know it's a nervous laugh. Like, oh, it's funny. He's just in a wood chipper. You know? It's not supposed to be funny. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Nice. So that would be it for anyone. Anyone else have any questions? Or we're down there? We're good? Yeah. Okay. I have one.
Yeah.
What do you think about, like, some actors, I think, with the they'll take they look at maybe a big budget movie versus a ultra low budget SAG movie, and I think sometimes actors not understanding the two, they think that maybe the ultra low budget is really, they're new to acting too, they're not the, a known actor. Sometimes they think maybe the low budget is not worthy of anything. Sometimes they'll think that they don't understand the process of the importance of these independents and the ultra low, because there's more of those made versus the super big budget. Because some of these actors have read for major roles and major budget, and then ultra low. And sometimes seems to me sometimes they can feel like the ultra low is not, it's no big deal. When it seems to me that there's a lot of going on. I mean, there's a lot of.
I think you should take it seriously. I mean, I think I think you have more room in the ultra low world to be what you want, like to experiment with your acting and how you want to perfect it. Because once you get into that bigger budget world, especially if you're newer and they don't know who you are, they're not going to let you do certain things. It's going to be Michael Bay coming down and yelling at you, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think using the low budget world as sort of like your playground and to really experiment, because I think as a director too, you should be letting your actors play in that world. I mean, you're not paying them very well if you're paying them at all. And so to try to force them to do something you want them to do, I think this is silly. Like, you should all be trying to make the best movie you possibly can. So I think the ultra budget world should never be taken for granted as far as an actor goes, anybody goes, because I think you could make something that ultimately hits like Saw. I mean, that movie was ultra budget, ultra low, all of a sudden massive thing. So I talked to James about that several times and how he did that. And so I think it's a very crucial part of our industry, is all of us out here with our cameras just going out and making something cool, like what we think is cool, because that could be the next cool thing. I don't know. I mean, I think that's really important.
And I think pretty much with like yourself, when you did your independent movie with the low budget, you end up getting recognized for your abilities, your artistic abilities, and it led to some other opportunities.
Yeah.
Same thing I think with the actors, like you can be in a smaller project, but then it gets artistic recognition out there, and therefore you get recognized, and then
you just never know what project is going to do what.
It can turn into something.
You don't know who's watching. I mean, that's the great thing about the internet, and that's why I think everything should be online. I think you should be putting everything you do somewhere that people can see, because I mean, every actor should have a website, number one. But like, so they should be able to go somewhere and find, I mean, if they see you in a film, they should be able to Google you and find you and watch your stuff. But yeah, you just never know who's watching it, and they might hate the movie, but they might like that one scene that you're in and say that one scene was decent. You know what I mean? That was good, or whatever it was. I want that person to come back to read for me. So, believe me, I sit through terrible movies all the time. When we're casting, I watch the worst movies, but I usually will find one or two gems in those movies that are really busting their ass. So, like, I can tell what they're trying to do, and they just didn't get the right direction or whatever. So I think, doing the ultra low budget movies, whether you think the guy knows what he's doing behind the camera or not, is a different story. But you should just be trying to do your best work.
Yes. Thank you for that.
One more last question.
One more? Okay.
So as a director, of course, you want to get I would think the biggest stars you can to sell your film, as you said, foreign films. So when do you want to get that new star, like you just said, for the new film you just did, the new ones who've never been on front of a camera before, or never.
I do that in every movie. Every movie. Because I don't need giant stars in every role. I need them for one role, like basically. So it's like, if I get Malcolm, I'm set. Jamie and Donald were bonuses, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a weird place to like play like that, but like, for me, it's like, really only need one big name that sells our foreign, and then that helps everything. And then all of the minor roles, and not even minor roles, I mean like some of the roles like in Silent Night are big roles, or lead roles, that we just found that people have never done anything with. And that's important to me because I think, you know, I don't need names for myself. Like I just want whoever's the best person for that part. So one or two I'll have to sacrifice like the name, even though they're probably awesome for that, but it's definitely a name thing. But for everything else in every movie I do, I'm always searching for someone that's nobody's seen before. Because I mean I want to find the next Johnny Depp. You know what I mean? Like I want to find the next Ryan Gosling who, I mean that's the great thing, is like you want to find that guy because that like Johnny who was in Under the Bed, like that guy goes and blows up. It's like with Brian, when after he made Drive, he won't make another movie without that director. That's important, you know what I mean? Because if he becomes the big guy, then he's going to go to the studio and go, I want Steven making this movie with me. So of course, I want to find that guy or girl that's going to become gigantic and sort of like, if I haven't gotten there yet, it's about, again, connections, taking me with you. Yeah. So
thank you for that opportunity for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just fun anyway. I think you get more out of them and they're more excited and then it's a lot more fun sometimes. And even if they're not bad, but if they're not really sure what they're doing on set, it's even more fun for me to like really hang out and try to get them used to it. Yeah, so I'm never opposed to new talent. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you had any experiences, but people do. Have you ever ran into anything or have friends that have been screwed over by someone in this industry, and how did they deal with it, or how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a yearly basis. If not monthly. Like I said, I was attached to make movies at Paramount, MGM, and Fox Atomic, and those are movies that I got screwed over on, you know what I mean? Like, invested in heavily, development, like process, work, like sketch art, paid for art, everything that I could possibly do to make these movies I know were going to be big. Didn't happen. They just walked away. That's something that I had to deal with. But I've had other instances where it's been even more intense, where like I did a web series for our company, and I shot the web series, and I thought it was really great, and then they just never put the web series out because they couldn't